Hi, my name is Matthew Christian from Tampa, Florida, and on behalf of Expert Village, today I'd like to talk to you about the proper use and maintenance of a pressure washer.
Okay, we've talked about it. Now let's go ahead and set up our pressure washer. Remember, as I mentioned before, it's before you hook up your supply line, it's important to bleed any air out of the garden hose. Another thing I'd like to add also is I've got here a standard, your typical household garden hose. This hose will supply plenty of water for this particular machine. This is a low output machine, relatively speaking. But when you get to the larger gas-powered units that might be 4,000 psi, or it's not so much the pressure, but the gallon per minute units that go anywhere from 3 to 4 gallon or up gallons per minute, you'll want to use a larger diameter supply line. I think this one is 5/8. Home improvement stores you can get up to 3/4. So basically, if you're going to be using a larger machine, I recommend using the larger supply line because the machine uses more water and you want to make sure it has as much water as it needs. But again, for all practical purposes, this standard supply line will work fine. Also notice that I've put a shut-off end on the tip of this hose. I've turned the water on, but as I mentioned, it's important that you release the air pressure out of the line before you use it. So I'm going to let the air out. Okay, now that I think I've got all the air out, I'll go ahead and make that connection. Make it nice and snug. Now we'll go ahead and hook up our other end. Now this is a quick disconnect fitting. To make this connection, you pull back this sleeve, push it in, and then push the sleeve forward, and that's locked into position. Okay? Again, this is electric, so next we need to plug in the electric cord into the wall. Another point I'd like to make is when you're using any electric power tool, if you're going to use an extension cord, make sure you use an extension cord that's a heavy enough gauge to supply the current needed for that particular power tool. This unit here, it's a 5 horsepower electric motor, so it does consume quite a bit of current or electricity. It has its own 15-foot cord on it, but if I needed something longer, it would be probably a good idea to use a heavy gauge, perhaps maybe a 10 gauge extension cord, to make sure that the unit is getting the electricity that it needs. Otherwise you could potentially burn out the pump, or the motor rather.